All right, so for our last type of problems that we're going to do, and we've got a couple of them to go over to, we're going to talk about money. So money problems are set up in a very specific way, and this will, if you'll remember this, it'll make it a whole lot easier. Your first equation is always about how many. And it could be how many tickets you sold, how many dimes you have, how many hours you worked at a job, but how many? How many are you looking at? And then your second equation is always about the money. So this is how much money. How much money did you earn per hour which you were working? How much money is a quarter worth or a dime worth? How much money was it to buy the ticket? So again, the first equation is always how many, and the second equation is always the money and how much. So for our first example, we have a word problem, and again, we're going to use step 1 and 2 where we're going to identify our equations first. Notice that it's having us use the letters D and Q, and then we'll do the second equation where we solve the problem. So Anne has some dimes and quarters. This is why we're using the letters D and Q, so we can identify the dimes and quarters. If she has 35 coins worth a total of $5.45, how many of each type of coin does she have? So when we're working this problem, our how many is 35, and our how many is made up of dimes and quarters. So our first equation, our how many equation, is going to be D plus Q is equal to 35. Now we have to talk about how much. So a dime is worth 10 cents. So that's going to be 0.10D. 10 cents times the number of dimes we have, right? So if I have 5 dimes, I do 0.10 times 5, I have 50 cents. That's my amount of money. Same thing with a quarter. A quarter is worth 25 cents, so that would be 0.25Q equals how much money she had, which was $5.45. Okay? And now we just have to solve these two equations. Remember, this is our step 1, placing these two equations in, and then to step 2 is to solve it. I actually like solving for my D just because he's a little bit smaller of a number as far as the decimal point here, so it's a 0.10. So I need this guy to be a negative 0.10. So I'm just going to take this entire first equation and multiply by negative 0.10. That's going to give me negative 0.10D minus 0.10Q equals a negative 3.5. And if you want to add a 0 to that, so when you do your subtraction, you see they line up nice and pretty. And then this guy we're not going to change. This is going to be 0.10D plus 0.25Q equals 5.45. Again, we're eliminating our dimes, so our dimes are gone. 0.25 minus 0.10 would give us 0.15Q, and then 5.45 minus 3.50 would give us 1.95. And then to finish that off, all we would need to do is divide by that 1.15 on both sides. And that's going to tell us that Anne had 13 quarters. But again, remember, that's not my final answer. That's just part of it. I also need to know how many dimes she had. Definitely easier to plug it into this first equation than trying to plug it into the second one, which you could do, but I'm going to go with that first one and say I've got D plus her 13 quarters equals 35. So we're going to subtract 13 from both sides, and we're going to find out that Anne has 22 dimes. So she has 13 quarters and 22 dimes. Again, remember, when you're doing this, you have 2 steps. Step 1 is to write out these 2 equations, and I'll have a spot for you to do that. And then step 2 is to actually find the dimes and quarters, making sure you're plugging them into the correct box in your homework. Okay, so for our next problem, again, it's a money problem, so we're still dealing with that how many and then how much. Okay, those are our two questions for our equations. Again, how many and how much. So admission to a baseball game is $2 for general seats and $6 for reserved. The receipts were $3,104 for 984 paid admissions. How many of each ticket were sold? So again, the how many is how many tickets. So look at, we had 984 paid admissions, that's the how many, and those were made up from our general and our reserved. And so I'm going to use G and R just so when I get my final answer I know exactly what I'm looking at. So I've got G plus R equals 984. Again, that's my how many. Now let's talk about the money. So my how much is my general seat cost $2. So that's 2 times my G. So every person who bought a general seat is paying $2, so 2G. Plus my $6 for my reserve seat, so this is 6R. And then the total amount collected, the total amount of money, was $3,104. So those are my two equations. Again, my first equation, how many seats I sold. The second equation, how much money did we make. Now, again, most of these problems for the money problems, I like to go ahead and use the addition method. So, and I always tend to choose the smaller of the two variables to eliminate. So since he's got a smaller coefficient, I'm going to multiply this guy by a -2. So multiply this entire equation, the first one, by -2. So that's going to give us -2G minus 2R equals -2 times 984. And it's going to give us -1968. And then this guy we're just going to bring right over. So 2G plus 6R equals 3104. Again, add my two equations together since I'm using the addition method. My 2G's are going to cancel, which is what I wanted to happen. I get 4R equals 3104 minus 1968 gives us 1136. So now all we got to do is solve for that R. So we're going to divide by 4 on both sides. And we get that we sold 284 reserved seats. And that's just, again, part of my answer, because remember, I'm wanting to know how many tickets of each type were sold. So I know I sold 284 reserved. So now we're going to go G plus 284 equals 984. So we're going to subtract that 284 from both sides. And we're going to get that G equals 700. So there's our second value. So we sold 700 general seats. We sold 284 reserve. Alright, so for our last problem that we're going to do for this section, again, we're looking at a money problem. It says Brian is working his way through school. He works 2 part-time jobs for a total of 25 hours a week. Job A pays him $6.40 per hour, and Job B pays him $6.70 per hour. How many hours did he work at each job the week he made $162.70? So again, remember, we're still asking ourselves the same question since we're dealing with money. How many and then how much? So we know how many is the number of hours he worked. So that's our many question, right? And he's working those at Job A and Job B. So I'm going to say A plus B equals 25. So there's my how many question. How many hours at Job A, how many hours at Job B equals the 25 hours he worked that week. Now we got to talk about how much money he's making. So at Job A, it says it pays him $6.40. And you can drop that last zero on this, just do 6.4A. Plus, Job B pays him $6.70. Again, we can drop that last zero and just say 6.7B. And he made $162.70. Again, we can drop that last zero and just do 162.7. 62.7. It's a whole lot easier when you drop those zeros away and just look at them as decimal numbers. If you want to put the zero back, that's perfectly fine, but extra zeros on the end don't make much of a difference in mathematics. Now, again, setting up for elimination. He is my smaller of the two, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply by the 6.4, and I'm going to do a negative 6.4 since I need it to be the opposite sign. So that's going to give me negative 6.4a minus 6.4b, and then I've got to do 25 times negative 6.4, and that's going to give us a negative 160. Alright, and then this guy's just going to stay the way he is, so 6.4a plus 6.7b equals 162.7. Again, my a's should be canceling since those are the ones I wanted to eliminate. I've got 6.7 minus 6.4, which is going to give me 0.3b. And we've got 162.7 minus 160, which is going to give us 2.7. So now we're going to divide by 0.3 on both sides. That's going to give us how many hours he worked at job B, which would be 9. So he worked 9 hours at job B. And we're going to take that in, we're going to plug it in and say A plus 9 equals 25. Finding out how many hours he worked at job A. So we're going to subtract 9 from both sides. And we've got that A equals 25 minus 9, which is going to give us 16. So he worked 9 hours at job B. He worked 16 hours at job A.